Have you ever stopped to think that, among all the sins mentioned in the Bible, there are 3 that are truly terrifying? We're not talking about common sins, but those that have the devastating power to destroy lives, relationships, and even souls. These sexual sins not only challenge God's commandments, but also place a person in a position of great spiritual risk. And the most frightening part? You might already be trapped in one of these sins without even realizing it. Yes, it's possible that this trap has been carefully disguised as something harmless, but the truth is, it carries a heavy burden that few can bear. These sins are so dangerous that they can cloud spiritual discernment, leading to a spiral of guilt, shame, and eventually, a distance from God. It's no wonder the Bible makes a point of warning us about the destructive power of these transgressions. But don't despair, because awareness is the first step toward liberation. In this video, we will uncover these 3 sexual sins that have terrorized souls throughout the centuries and how you can protect yourself from them. Get ready, because what you're about to discover could change your life forever. Not all sins hold the same weight in God's eyes. Imagine sins as stains on the soul, each with a different intensity. While some may seem like small slips, others carry profound and lasting impacts. The distinction between minor and grave sins often goes unnoticed, but the truth is that certain actions can distance us more from God. It's as if each sin has a different echo in eternity, some softer, others deafening. For instance, a lie may seem harmless, but a heart that hardens to the habit of lying can drift further from divine truth. However, there are sins that go beyond minor faults, affecting not only spiritual life, but also one's communion with the surrounding community. These are the ones that bear heavier consequences, both spiritually and emotionally, creating barriers that can be difficult to overcome without true repentance. Understanding this difference is crucial for a conscious Christian life. It's not just about avoiding evil, but discerning what truly separates us from God's path. And this understanding opens doors to reflect on the sins that deeply impact the soul, like the ones we will explore next. After all, if some sins are more severe, what can be said about those that destroy lives and relationships? Sexual sins carry a unique gravity in spiritual life, affecting both the individual and the community around them. When it comes to sins like fornication, adultery, and pornography, the consequences go beyond the visible, penetrating deeply into the soul and leaving scars that are hard to heal. These transgressions are not just physical acts. They touch the most sensitive areas of human existence, where vulnerability and intimacy are often exploited and destroyed. Think of these sins as wildfires that spread quickly, consuming everything in their path. A single spark can unleash spiritual, emotional, and even physical chaos. For instance, pornography might seem like a private matter, but its corrosive effect spreads into relationships, corrupting perceptions of love and respect. This type of sin affects not only the person committing it, but also those around them, creating a web of destruction that is hard to escape. The real trap of sexual sins lies in their seductive power and the illusion of immediate pleasure. What begins as an innocent temptation can quickly turn into a vicious cycle of guilt and shame. Recognizing the danger of these sins is the first step in breaking these chains and seeking a life aligned with Christian values. And by understanding this, we prepare ourselves to face the even greater challenges that come with the consequences of these actions. Fornication is one of those sins that leaves deep marks on the soul, creating spiritual bonds that are difficult to break. This type of sin isn't just a physical transgression. It involves an intimate connection that often goes beyond understanding. By engaging in such acts, one might be building spiritual ties that bring long-lasting consequences, both emotionally and spiritually. It's like an invisible scar that, while not seen, is deeply felt. Imagine each act of fornication as a tattoo on the soul, something that doesn't fade easily. Even when the act itself is forgotten, the repercussions remain, affecting one's ability to form healthy relationships in the future. For example, someone who repeatedly engages in fornication might find it challenging to establish true intimacy in a committed relationship. This vicious cycle can lead to a spiritual emptiness that is difficult to fill, creating a barrier to a genuine connection with God. The depth of fornication's impact is often underestimated, but its ramifications are vast. When healing and repentance are not sought, these spiritual bonds can become invisible prisons, keeping one in a state of continuous dissatisfaction and distance from God. And so, one might begin to notice the more devastating effects of sin on the heart, as we'll see next when adultery comes into play. Adultery is a sin that carries immense destructive power, both for the person committing it and those around them. It not only breaks vows of fidelity, but also corrodes moral integrity, shaking the spiritual foundations of the individual. When someone indulges in adultery, they open the door to a spiral of suffering that deeply affects the soul, causing damage that may take years to repair, if it can be fully healed at all. Think of adultery as a sledgehammer striking the heart, creating cracks that spread throughout one's life. These cracks can manifest as distrust, guilt, and resentment, destroying not only the marriage but also relationships with friends, family, and even with God. A classic example is when adultery leads to the end of what seemed like a solid union, leaving deep emotional scars on everyone involved. The impact isn't limited to the couple. It reverberates through the community, shaking trust and harmony among people. The devastating effect of adultery is not just a matter of physical betrayal, but also of spiritual violation. The soul that allows itself to betray is, in reality, betraying itself and the sacred principles it should honor. And when the person realizes the depth of the damage caused, it is often too late to prevent total collapse. This is the insidious nature of adultery. It destroys from within, setting the stage for the next sin, which can be even more devastating. Pornography is a silent threat that creeps into people's lives, destroying relationships and corroding the spiritual health of those who become dependent on it. Often underestimated, its addictive nature turns something that may seem harmless into a destructive force capable of devastating marriages and ruining inner peace. Pornography isn't just a matter of personal indulgence. It affects how one views themselves, others, and most importantly, how they relate to God. Imagine pornography as a shadow that expands, obscuring the light of the soul. What begins as a curiosity can quickly evolve into a cycle of guilt and shame, where one finds themselves trapped in a pattern of behavior that seems impossible to break. For example, an individual might start avoiding healthy and meaningful interactions, replacing real intimacy with fleeting and empty pleasure. This not only destroys the capacity for genuine love, but also distances the person from the plan that God has for their life. The threat of pornography is real and devastating, as it undermines the spiritual and emotional foundation of those who indulge in it. It creates invisible barriers that make it difficult to connect with God and others, leaving the person isolated in a world of unrealistic fantasies. Recognizing this danger makes it possible to seek help and liberation, but it's essential to understand that the first step is acknowledging the profound impact this sin has on one's spiritual and emotional life. And by doing so, one begins to see the traps these sins lay in their path, opening their mind to deeper reflections on how to avoid such downfalls. Now that you understand the gravity of these sexual sins, it's time to reflect on your own life and take steps to protect yourself and those you love. Think about how these sins might be influencing your choices and relationships, and ask yourself, am I truly living according to the values I believe in? Change begins with a conscious decision to turn away from these temptations and seek a path of spiritual renewal. Are you willing to do that? Are you ready to leave behind what separates you from God and embrace a fuller life aligned with divine principles? Don't let the weight of these sins continue to erode your soul. Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and join us on this journey of spiritual growth and overcoming. There is much more to learn, and every step you take toward the light is a step toward true freedom.